Hey, welcome to another episode of Permission Granted, Women Who Thrive, Inspire, and Lead Unapologetically. My name is Kasia Rachfall, and I'm here with my awesome, amazing friends and coworkers, Shelly and Kim and Eva. And we are bringing you this podcast to talk about things that impact us as women, especially women who have, families and careers, and we want to take time for ourselves. There's a lot more to having a life that we love, not just a life, but a life that we love, than just, doing the work thing, the family thing, and going for, a run once in a while. Right? There's so much that goes into it. And so we created this podcast so that we could have these conversations that matter, these hard conversations that sometimes, you don't know if you should tell anyone. And so today's topic is a big one. And it's only, we're going to share a slice of what this whole topic is all about. And we're going to talk about emotions and the impact they have on us. As we're going into spring now and everything is starting to crack open and bloom, and often we talk about spring cleaning, the new is coming up, but what about the old, right? What about the old stuff that perhaps we're still carrying around with us from the winter, from past seasons, even from last year? How do we deal with that? And, there's a reason why we have this thing called spring cleaning. And you may even have found that you feel an urge to purge, right? You feel this like, I need to clean. I need to just give me a bag. I'm going to throw some stuff in there because I don't want it anymore. Well, the same thing happens to us emotionally. And I'm going to share a personal story just from this past weekend because it really illustrates how this can happen when we're least expecting it, right? Just like we want to clean our windows and dust our shelves and purge our home because all of a sudden spring hits and it's like we come out of this hibernation and we can see it, all of it better, and we don't want the clutter anymore. Our emotions hit us in that way where all of a sudden we're paying attention to them because we didn't notice that we were feeling that way before. Or if you're empathic, which many women are naturally empathic, but if that's a skill that you've practiced and you've, what's the word I'm looking for? Nurtured. So you're more empathic, right? These things can come out of left field and leave you feeling just exhausted before you even realize if it's even your emotion. And so that's where I want to begin. This weekend, I had my family visiting, my mother and my grandma, and lovely visit. It's always great to have them. And I always feel a little bit sad when they leave because they live about 3.5 hours away from me. And so I only get to see them once a month, once every couple months, especially in the winter, right? Where the highway's covered in snow. It's dangerous. We don't typically drive. But they were here for Easter for my daughter's birthday, and it was amazing. And then on the last day when they were leaving, I was hit with this wasn't just sadness. Okay. Sadness is just okay, yeah, hug, cry, get in the car, go home. I'm fine. This was melancholy. This was, I don't even have words for the depth of sadness that this was. It was like this. And not only that, it was this preoccupation with death and dying on top of it. So this was beyond homesickness. This was beyond just sadness. It was melancholy combined with this fear of what if they die? What if I never see them again? And I was a mess for the rest of the night. And my husband's like, oh, you miss your mom. And all I could say was, yeah, and just burst out crying again because I didn't even know how to explain it. And so I work with emotions all the time as a coach and healer. This is what my clients come to me with. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to do my thing, do the process I always do, name it, feel it, focus in on it in the body, be grateful for it, all that stuff. And I woke up this morning still kind of reeling from it. And so I was journaling and I had the thought pop in, this isn't yours. And I thought, oh my God, of course, of course. Why didn't I think of that before? And so I bring up this topic because especially us as women, we're so used to, whether it's conditioning from our past or societal or cultural conditioning or whatever, we often think we're not enough, we're not doing the right things, we're, all these things that point to how we are doing life wrong. And so then when we get hit with a strong emotion like that's really hard to process, or really hard to wrap your head around, and like wrap your heart around and release, you might think, oh my gosh, like, what's wrong with me? Am I in depression? Am I ill? What's wrong with me? Like that is my go-to, and I do this work. So that was my go-to question for myself, is what's wrong with me now? Until I, kind of reeled myself in and said, okay, I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate. And that's when that thought came of, this isn't yours. And so when that came, and I was able to, release it more. And of course, emotion is never easy, right? It always hangs around. It takes a little more sometimes to let it go than other times, but at least I was able to get that objective distance from it and realize that I am not this emotion, and I am not the thoughts I think. So it brought me objectivity, and that's why I bring this topic to the table, because like, how many of you have ever found yourself completely accosted by an emotion, right? And then, and what do you do?
So for me, I think we've all experienced what you experienced this weekend, but for me, just to put a different sort of angle on it, I have this happen all the time when my husband comes home from work, right? He gets home and he's had a stressful, hard day, and I am just hit with this wall of negativity. Being an empath, I often absorb that and I don't even realize. I'm far more aware now, but there was times where we would be like screaming at each other within 10 minutes of him arriving at home. And you don't even realize that, I wasn't feeling like that before he walked in the door, but you don't make the connection. So now I know that to process that and move through it is to just keep remembering, this is not mine. I'm feeling his feelings. I'm uncomfortable because I'm feeling that negativity. How can I help him to feel better, right? And that's how I'm able to then, bring the level of anxiety in our home down, because this affects our children and everyone else present in the home as well, right? So
yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm.
I know as a healthcare worker, I spend a lot of time in intensive care units, and there was an instance maybe about a year ago. I remember, like, I can almost like picture the day still, because it was like so bright and sunny outside, and all of a sudden I had this overwhelming feeling to just burst into tears. And I'm like, what is going on with me? Like, why am I wanting to cry right now? Like, it just made no sense. I'm like, 10 minutes ago I was fine, and now I'm just overcome with tears. And I had been meeting with a family who was dealing with life or death decisions. Are we going to keep this patient, keep our loved one on a breathing machine and transfer him to the next level and hope to show some signs of recovery? Or are we going to decide to go comfort cares and let him go? It took me, like, I literally had to walk out on the patio of the hospital, like, to get some fresh air and sit there, Kasia, like you said, and start journaling. And I'm like, oh, this is all of their stuff, because it made no sense to me at all. So in the work environment, it certainly can come up, and I can see where, Shelley, you feel that when your husband gets home from a crazy, long, busy day. And as a mom, when I had teenagers, I would often feel that too, because, or actually even my kids, my daughter used to say, why are you screaming at me? And I'm like, I'm not screaming at you. However, I think she felt my frustration internally building up when I was trying to be calm on the outside. So she would feel that energy, her empathic nature, she'd feel that energy. I'm like, no, I'm not raising my voice at you, but she could feel it. Well, it feels like it, she said. And I'm like, oh, well, when it feels like it, that doesn't necessarily mean you're hearing it. So I feel like we can be really affected by everyone else's emotions, good or bad. And then we have to take the steps to kind of process them. And my heart goes out to you, Kasia, because in that situation, like, your female relationships with your elders are so important and so heartfelt that I could see why you would think that was yours at first. You know what I mean? I can totally see that because we have such a deep connection. Well, I mean, we're all energy and we're all interconnected, but I mean, especially with our mothers and grandmothers. So
Yeah.
I know I'm sure, Eva, you've gone through that as well, haven't you?
And it's so weird because up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't relate to being an empath because I really didn't understand what that was. But now knowing the true definition of it, I had been such a huge, massive empath, I think, since I was a child. That's why oftentimes I thought I was like the weird one in the room, or why was I the only one that had, like, I was always the emotional one. And not knowing half the time that now thinking back, a lot of those emotions probably were not mine to process, like fear and certain things where I would feel scared, or out of nowhere, I would just start bawling my eyes out, not knowing why I felt so sad. And then as I got older, still not knowing what empath was about, I thought I was really suffering from depression. I would really question myself, like, oh my God, what is going on in my life that is causing me to be so depressed? And in doing the work and actually knowing to recognize, and exactly like Kasia said, asking myself that question, now that I can stop, drop, and really reflect on that and say, when I'm because now I can catch myself when I'm feeling not me, and either I go to a different emotion, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's like I'm impatient, that's another one that we can gauge ourselves with, being impatient. I'll ask myself, and a lot of the times it's really not my emotion. It could have been something that I just, picked up on energetically in the room, or sometimes even in public, like at a supermarket or a Walmart or something. You happen to be walking by someone and that connection hits, and then all of a sudden you feel like that rush of, like, sadness, or your hearts, or you get like those aches in your bodies. And for me, I feel it more in my chest, so I get really sensitive. And now that I have those tools, I can better assess, but it still sucks in the process.
Yeah.
Because at first, and I can relate to what Kasia says, because my mom just turned 70. She's having health issues, and I spent the day with her yesterday as well. And I look at her, and it breaks my heart because, again, I start thinking the whole what if situation. And we just recently lost my brother. It's going to be 2 years in August. And that lingers with me. So when I wake up and I feel sadness, I tend to try not to relate too much to it. But sometimes it's hard to detach from what's going on for you in your life and in your circumstances. But again, it's that awareness and really knowing that sometimes it's really not ours to process. But there's a lesson in it, even though it wasn't ours to process, because now you can equate that with your mother and your grandmother and know that those are going to be true, genuine feelings that you might have going forward. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of the times when we do have those moments that's not our energy to process, there's always that lesson that you learn. So that you can leave that self for the future, to know that, okay, if that's how I handled it before, even though it wasn't mine, I could probably know that I'm strong enough to handle it when it really is mine.
For sure. And what in my meditation, even though the feeling of sadness obviously doesn't feel good, like I much prefer feeling happy or joyful or whatever. All negative no negative emotion feels good, but we can still get to a place of gratitude for it. Because it reminds us, like you said, Eva, of like, I'm so fortunate to have such a beautiful love from my grandma, from my mom, and I'm so lucky to still have both of them. My grandma's 88 this year, so I want her to live forever. But at the same time, and I think I mentioned this in our pre-conversation too, like as empaths, those of us who practice this work, and this isn't something that you have to do, but if you choose to do it, you can clear family lineages through your own processing of these emotions. And so having opened myself up to that work, that's what I do in my family. But just as an aside, if you prefer not to, then you can put up protection eggs or bubbles around yourself, and then you're more not isolated, like insulated from it. So if that's something you want to know more about, then definitely we can speak about that in one of our episodes, how to do that, to manage those emotions, because they're not comfortable when they hit you like that, like a ton of bricks, or like what Shelly was saying, or Kim, right? It literally feels like you are accosted, and if you don't know what to do in that moment, it can be very, very difficult. And because emotions are so magnetic, and this is something that Shelly teaches, right? They're so magnetic. If you keep on that freight train, pretty soon your whole day goes south, and then your whole week goes south, and then we think we're depressed, like Eva said. So yeah, it's like a fine, delicate balance with these emotions.
I think
with my work with loving your soul self and really self-care and self-love, what do you guys do when you come across periods of time where you are really heightened for all these emotions? Because I'm listening to you, Kasia, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so beautiful that you recognize that it wasn't yours. And it's even more beautiful that whichever family member it was loves you so deeply that they felt that sadness leaving you, because that love is just in the DNA, you know what I mean? I know you talked about like stepping back, and maybe we can talk about maybe a permission slip, stepping back and journaling and letting your emotions flow and crying it out. What do you guys do when you come across these overwhelming feelings to kind of keep yourself in check?
The first thing I do is really ask myself, now that I have that awareness, I'll take that moment, I'll go into my room or my office where I know I can be like by myself to process, and really go through asking myself those series of questions. Is this mine to process? And if so, what's the lesson that I need to learn here? And then exactly like Kasia said, how can I move forward to soothe myself and feel grateful for this moment so that I can release that overwhelming feeling of sadness or whichever feeling happens to come across me that day.
I think for me, the number one thing that I turn to is leading with love. I use it as a way to feel compassion for the other person, because if I can physically feel the emotions that are going through your body and you don't even realize that they're there, then I can send you love and compassion to help you to get to the point where you can have that same awareness and be able to process those things. Especially my husband doesn't come home wanting to be this, bull in a china shop. He comes home looking for love. So if I am not aware of what's going on, then I meet him with what he's presenting. But if I'm aware, then I can express compassion and love towards him, and I can, downplay that. If I'm sensing frustration from somebody in a lineup at the grocery store and I know that they are having a really hard day, maybe me sending them a little bit of love and light will help them to move through and have a better day. That's how I go about that.
For me, I really go into cultivating a feeling of safety around negative emotions, because they don't feel good, and often we identify so much with them as I am sad, as opposed to I am experiencing sadness. So cultivating a I guess system or practice, probably a better word, practice of feeling safe, feeling your negative emotions through observation. Because often what happens when we feel these emotions that don't feel good, we resist, or we try to numb them, or we try to get as far, as fast away from them as we possibly can. And unfortunately, what that does is it makes them stick around more. And so the process that I've pieced together from various, mentors and self-practices is naming it first. So whatever the label is, and I've created a whole course about this, because it's like, to me, this is, if you know how to feel safe feeling your emotions, anything else becomes a lot easier. So you name it with whatever makes sense to you, whether it's sadness or melancholy or, whatever. Then you focus in on it in your physical body, because it's pointing inside you that there's a part of you that's hurting. And in this instance, for me, it was that sadness, just because it wasn't mine. I'm sure it commingled with sadness that I felt. And so I focus in on that in my body, and then I have a conversation with that emotion. What does it need? And this comes out of Matt Kahn's work, because he says, whatever arises, love that. And so if sadness arises, there is something that it wants me to know. There is something that it wants me to pay attention to inside me, or if it's anger or something. And so when you can have that conversation with that emotion, this is how I got to that piece of feeling grateful, knowing that I'm so gifted with the love of these two women in my life, right? They're not just like dumping their crap on me. It's not that at all. It's through that sadness, through that melancholy, I was able to get to that depth of love and unwrap that gift. And I've been practicing this a long time. So in the beginning, it's hard to remember, oh my God, what's step one, right? But if you just allow yourself to feel the physical sensation of that emotion in your body instead of trying to resist it or run away from it, it'll pass so much faster. It'll be like having a wave pass through you in the ocean instead of like you trying to thrash around in it, trying to get out of it. That's my process.
Do you have resources for that, Kasia, that you could share underneath our our podcast today?
Absolutely. I'll put a link. It's kasiarachfall.com/FSF. It's the Feel Safe Feeling Blueprint, but I will absolutely put a link to that because it's been instrumental in my own life and a lot of the women that I've worked with. It's allowed them to just get more calm and not freak out so much when they feel angry or sad or something, or they're triggered.
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome.
So I think permission slips. My permission slip, I'm saying permission granted to just feel it. Don't be afraid of it. It's not who you are. Just feel it. Allow yourself to feel it.
My permission slip is going to be permission granted to release it and send it back with love and light. So permission granted to release.
Permission granted to experience love and compassion for what you are feeling, even if it's not yours, and to share that love and compassion for others.
Mm-hmm. My permission granted is to heal and soothe yourself through that process, to be gentle with it while you're going through asking yourself, is this mine? And how to actually work yourself through it, to be compassionate for yourself so that you can show up compassionate for others, is to heal and soothe yourself through it and know that you will get through this, that you're not alone in doing this, even though it seems lonely because you're collectively doing it on your own. Know that you're supported by doing the healing or the soothing on your own.
And there's nothing wrong with you.
Exactly. Absolutely not. It's perfectly normal. You are not anything less just for feeling that way. Absolutely. Great point, Shelley.
Yeah. We are wired to be great feelers as human beings. And so these emotions aren't going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
So learning how to work with them rather than against them is really what gives us the emotional freedom to thrive in our life. And I want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Permission Granted podcast. If you have questions or if you have suggestions for a topic, please leave a comment below, tag a friend, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, because the word about our work and how we are serving women is going to spread through your helping us and your willingness to share the message. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the Permission Granted Manifesto, the link for that is also below. This is a collection of statements and empowering statements that we have put together that we live in our life. You know, we live according to these as often as we can remember. We want to share those with you. So the link to that is below this video. And of course, subscribe. And we wish you an amazing rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.